Hi guys, tonight we're stepping into the deep, misty beginning of onions, the humble little bulb that somehow managed to feed civilizations while making nearly everyone cry about it. Picture a low field at dusk, soil cool under bare feet, smoke curling from a clay hearth, and a sharp green scent rising when someone pulls a wild onion from the earth. How did something so ordinary become one of humanity's oldest companions? How did this small, layered vegetable travel from rough ground and simple fires into nearly every kitchen on Earth? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And while you're getting comfortable, comment where you're watching from and what your local time is, because somewhere out there, someone may be listening at midnight while an onion soup simmers in their imagination. Now, dim the lights. You walk into a world without recipes, without markets, without the tidy baskets of golden onions that wait today in grocery stores like quiet little moons. The air is cooler here, the sky is wide, and the ground still belongs mostly to grasses, stones, insects, and wandering feet. You're moving through a landscape where food is never casual. Every root, berry, seed, and shoot matters. Hunger is not a dramatic visitor. It is a patient neighbour. Under your fingers, the soil feels crumbly and damp. Somewhere nearby, water slips along a shallow stream with a soft, silver sound. The breeze carries the smell of crushed leaves, animal hides, wood ash, and the faint peppery bite of plants from the allium family. This is the family of onions, garlic, leeks, shallots, and chives. Although no one here would say that in such a neat classroom voice. Nobody is standing around with a botanical chart, which is probably for the best, because nothing ruins the mystery of survival like laminated taxonomy. You crouch beside a patch of slender green shoots. They do not look impressive. No bright fruit hangs from them. No heavy grain head nods in the wind. But someone nearby knows them. Maybe an older gatherer points with a stick. Maybe a child has learned not to pull the wrong plant. The leaves are narrow, hollow, and cool against the palm. When the bulb is loosened from the earth, it gives off that unmistakable scent. Sharp, sulphurous, strangely clean. Your eyes may sting a little. Even here, near the beginning, the onion has already invented its most dramatic personality trait. The mainstream truth is simple and remarkable onions belong among the very old food plants of human history. Their exact first domestication is difficult to pin down, because bulbs decay easily and leave fewer traces than grain, bone, or pottery. Still, onion relatives grew across broad regions of the ancient old world, and early farming communities came to value them because they were hardy, flavorful, portable, and useful in small amounts. That is a powerful combination. A little onion could change a dull pot of boiled grain. A handful of green leaves could brighten a meal that otherwise tasted like warm patience. You follow the people as they move between gathering and tending, between wild land and the first gestures of farming. The line is not clean. It never is. They may protect a patch of useful plants near camp. They may scatter seeds, move bulbs, notice which ones grow larger, which ones keep longer, which ones bite the tongue in the most pleasing way. Farming does not arrive like a trumpet blast. It often arrives like habit. Someone returns to the same patch. Someone clears weeds. Someone saves the bigger bulbs. A small preference becomes a practice, and practice, given generations, becomes agriculture. Historians still argue whether onions were first domesticated in Central Asia, Southwest Asia, or across a wider zone where several wild alliums were gradually drawn into human use. The trouble is that onions are not generous to archaeologists. Grain can char in a hearth and survive as a blackened clue. Bones can lie in the ground like stubborn witnesses. Onion bulbs, soft and watery, usually vanish. They feed the soil and leave scholars muttering over fragments, impressions, old texts, and plant genetics, the onion, humble as ever, refuses to hand over a birth certificate, so you learn to imagine carefully. You do not imagine grand onion plantations yet. You imagine small plots, rough baskets, and hands that smell strongly of earth and green sap. You imagine bulbs hung in bunches from the roof beams of a simple shelter, drying slowly in smoke. The roof is low, the air is dim. A clay pot rests near embers. Inside it, crushed grains thicken in water. Someone adds onion leaves, perhaps a bulb chopped with a stone blade. The smell changes at once. It softens, deepens, becomes warm and savoury. The meal is still plain, yes, but now it has a kind of promise. There is comfort in that. You sit near the fire and feel heat on your shins while the night presses close beyond the circle of light. The sound of insects rises and falls. A child coughs, a dog, or an early village scavenger with opinions, noses near the scraps. The pot gives off steam scented with onion, smoke, and damp clay. The taste is not the sweet caramelized onion of a modern kitchen. It is sharper, greener, more direct. It wakes the mouth. It makes simple food feel attended to. In these early communities, food is also knowledge, knowing which plant can be eaten, which must be cooked, which stores through cold months, which helps disguise the taste of stale grain. All of this can mean survival. Onions have gifts that are easy to love. They can be dried. Some varieties keep well. They grow from bulbs, seeds, or sets depending on type and environment. They add flavour without requiring a feast. They are not glamorous, but glamour has never filled many stomachs. Glamour is delightful, of course, but try serving it in a clay bowl during a hungry season. Very crunchy, not very useful. You notice how the onion enters daily life quietly. It is not only food for celebration, it is food for repetition. Morning meals, evening stews, travel bundles, sickbed broths, meals eaten quickly in fields, meals stretched when supplies run thin. This is where civilization is often held together, not in jeweled crowns or carved monuments, but in the small ingredients that make ordinary survival bearable. An onion does not declare itself historic. It just sits in the ashes, softening. There is a quirky little truth hiding in this ancient darkness. Onions are almost ghostly in the archaeological record because their bodies disappear so completely. People may have eaten them constantly, planted them carefully, and valued them deeply, yet the physical evidence can be maddeningly faint. It is possible for a plant to be important and still leave almost nothing behind. That feels unfair, but also rather onion-like. It gives flavour to the whole pot, then melts away, expecting no applause. You stand near a storage pit lined with straw or dry leaves. Around it, the settlement breathes in slow rhythms. Grinding stones rasp softly as grain is crushed. A baby fusses and is rocked. The smell of livestock drifts in, earthy and warm. The onion bulbs, small compared with many modern varieties, wait in the cool shadow. Their skins may be thin and papery, their shapes uneven, their colours pale, reddish, or brown depending on the kind being tended. They are not standardised. No one has rejected them for being too small or not photogenic enough for a supermarket display. A merciful age, honestly. The people who keep them understand seasons by touch and smell. They know when the green shoots are tender. They know when bulbs are firm. They know how rot begins, that sour, damp warning. They know that strong-smelling plants can make a meal feel safer, richer, more satisfying. Some may connect onions with health long before written medicine develops formal explanations. The body responds, the nose clears, the mouth waters, the belly receives warm food. From such experiences, belief grows. You walk out toward the fields as pale morning comes. Mist clings low over the ground. The first light reveals patches of tended plants beside wilder growth. There are grains, perhaps legumes, perhaps flax or other useful species depending on the region. The onion is not alone, but it plays well with others. It belongs to the mixed kitchen garden, the practical plot, the place where flavour and medicine blur. You can almost hear the future rustling in those leaves, but the moment itself remains simple. A person bends, pulls, shakes soil from roots, and carries food home. The taste of onion also changes how people eat together. A shared pot smells stronger when onion is added. It announces itself. It draws attention. It says, gently but firmly, dinner is becoming something. Around the hearth, people recognize that smell. They associate it with warmth, with hands working, with the safe center of the settlement. It is easy to overlook how deeply human memory attaches to scent. Smoke, milk, sweat, rain on dust, onions in a pot. These are not footnotes to history. They are history entering the body through the nose. And perhaps this is why onions endure. They are layered, literally and culturally. Peel one skin, and there is another beneath. Peel back agriculture, and you find gathering. Peel back cuisine, and you find hunger. Peel back medicine, and you find observation. Peel back trade, and you find someone carrying bulbs because they matter enough to move. The onion seems simple only when you meet it at the surface. As the day warms, you feel the rough weave of a basket against your forearm. The bulbs inside knock softly together. Their scent clings to your fingers. Nearby, someone laughs because another person's eyes are watering from cutting them. Humanity has changed languages, tools, homes, gods, borders, and table manners, but that small kitchen comedy is already waiting in the ancient world. The onion has a way of humbling everyone equally. Kings will cry, farmers will cry, or cooks will cry. Archaeologists may also cry, though for different reasons. You settle beside the hearth again, where the pot has begun to murmur. Onion leaves float on the surface with grains and herbs. The steam touches your face. The smell is sharp at first, then mellow, folding itself into the meal. Outside, the settlement keeps moving through its quiet labours, but here, close to the fire, the world narrows to warmth, breath, and a bowl held in both hands. This is the onion's first great gift to civilization. Not grandeur, not luxury, not spectacle, but continuity. It helps ordinary people keep going. It turns scarcity into something with flavour. It makes the plain meal memorable. It stores sunlight underground, then gives it back as bite, sweetness, and scent. And in the slow hush of early human evenings, when the fields darken and the stars appear over roofs of reed, hide, or mud, you understand why such a small bulb could become a companion to settled life. It asks for little, it gives enough. It waits patiently in the earth until someone hungry reaches down. You stand beside the Nile while the morning is still blue, before the sun climbs high enough to turn the river into hammered gold. The mud at the bank is cool under your feet, soft enough to take the shape of your toes. Reeds whisper in a thin breeze. Waterbirds call from the shallows. Somewhere beyond the fields, a donkey complains with the full confidence of an animal that has never once been impressed by civilization. The air smells of wet silt, dung fuel, cut grass, and smoke from breakfast fires. Then another scent moves through it, sharper and more familiar, onions being sliced, crushed, roasted, and stirred into pots. It drifts from low houses of mud brick, from work camps, from temple kitchens, from the shaded corners where women and men prepare food for families who have already begun the day's labour. Egypt rises around you not only through stone monuments and royal names, but through bread, beer, garlic, leeks, and onions. Quiet things, necessary things. The sort of things history loves to eat, and then pretend it was only thinking about kings. In the fields, you see why onions belong here. The Nile has given its annual gift, a skin of dark, fertile mud laid across the land after the floodwaters withdrew. Farmers guide water through narrow channels. Their hands are rough, their linen is damp with sweat, and their backs bend into the rhythm of the season. Onion plants grow in orderly patches, their green shoots reaching from the soil like small promises. They do not need to be grand. Egypt already has enough grandeur. The onion's work is humbler. It feeds the living, honors the dead, and perfumes the space between body and belief. A mainstream historical fact rests plainly in this landscape. Ancient Egyptians cultivated and ate onions widely. Alongside bread and beer, onions and related alliums were part of daily nourishment for many people, from labourers to households serving temple estates. They appear in artistic scenes, in lists of provisions, and in burial contexts. You can almost feel the practicality of it. Onions are easy to carry, bold in flavour, and useful in simple meals. They can wake up flatbread, enrich lentil stews, and make a bowl of grain feel less like punishment delivered by a very boring god. You walk into a workers' settlement where the day is gathering heat. The walls hold the night's coolness for a little while longer, and your fingertips brush rough mud brick, dry at the surface but faintly powdery. A fire crackles low, a flat loaf rests near the embers, a pot gives off steam, and in that steam comes the unmistakable smell of onion softened by heat. Less fierce now, sweeter, rounder, almost buttery, though no butter waits nearby. Someone tears bread with dusty hands. Someone dips it. Someone eats quickly before carrying baskets, dragging sledges, mixing mortar, cutting stone, shaping mud, or tending animals. It is tempting to imagine the builders of Egypt eating only heroic food, as though pyramids require a diet of thunder and divine ambition. But the human body is less theatrical. It needs calories. It needs salt. It needs moisture. It needs something that makes repetitive meals bearable. Onions did that. They gave bite to bread and savour to stews. They could be eaten raw, cooked, dried, or combined with garlic and herbs. Their scent clung to hands and breath, turning the workforce into a moving cloud of agricultural confidence. Elegant, not entirely. Effective, absolutely. You pass a storehouse where provisions are counted. Scribes sit with reed pens, their hands stained with ink, their eyes trained to measure the world in signs, grain, beer jars, livestock, vegetables, oils, cloth. All of it enters the great machine of estate life. The scratching sound of writing is soft but persistent. In a civilization famous for its monuments, record-keeping is its own kind of architecture. The onion may not look noble beside gold masks and carved reliefs, but when food is being listed, distributed, and offered, it becomes part of the order that holds society together. Near a temple, the atmosphere changes. The light feels filtered, quieter, as if the air itself has learned to behave. Priests move through courtyards washed clean. Offerings are arranged with care. Bread, beer, meat, fruit, flowers, and vegetables may be set before the divine image. The onion's strong scent, so ordinary in a cooking hut, becomes something more charged here. Its layers, its circular form when sliced, its ability to sprout green life from a buried bulb, all invite meaning. Ancient Egyptians noticed patterns. They read the world as a field of signs. The onion, with its rings nested inside rings, was practically begging for interpretation, which is a dangerous thing around priests. A quirky and slightly strange tidbit waits in the burial chambers, and embalming traditions of Egypt onions were sometimes associated with mummified bodies and funerary rites. Archaeologists have found onions placed in tomb contexts. An ancient practice could include alliums near the body as offerings or symbolic objects. Some accounts describe onions positioned with mummies, even near the eyes or within wrappings. Though details vary across periods and discoveries, It sounds oddly intimate, almost too domestic for eternity. Imagine preparing a body for the afterlife and deciding that among linens, resins, amulets, and prayers, an onion also belongs. Ancient religion rarely worries about seeming normal to future museum visitors. You enter the dimness of a tomb, not as an intruder, but as a quiet observer of belief. The air is dry, dusty, and faintly resinous. Painted walls glow in earth colours under lamplight. Figures carry offerings in graceful profile. The silence feels thick, yet not empty. It is filled with food meant to continue beyond death, scenes meant to sustain, objects meant to help the soul travel safely. In that world, nourishment does not end at the grave. A person needs bread, beer, meat, fruit, and perhaps onions too. Even eternity, apparently, benefits from seasoning. Scholars continue to debate what onions meant in Egyptian ritual life. Some see the concentric rings as a symbol of eternity or endless return. Others suggest the strong smell represented vitality, breath, or protective force. Some are more cautious and argue that onions in tombs may have been practical food offerings before they became loaded with later symbolic meaning. The evidence is real, but meanings shift across centuries. Egypt lasted a very long time, and it did not keep one simple handbook called Everything We Meant by Vegetables. A shame, honestly. It would have saved everyone several conferences. You step back into sunlight where religious mystery gives way to lunch. A woman washes onion bulbs in a basin, rubbing away clinging dirt with her thumb. The skin rasps softly. Nearby, a child chews on green shoots with a solemn expression, as though judging the harvest. A pot of beans thickens over heat. Chopped onions go in, and the smell rises immediately, confident and generous. There is smoke in your hair now, fine dust on your ankles, warm linen brushing your skin. The world feels both sacred and practical, which may be one of Egypt's great secrets. The same vegetable can sit in a worker's bowl and beside the dead. The same scent can mean hunger, health, offering, and memory. In the markets, baskets of onions sit among dates, figs, fish, bread, herbs, and jars of oil. Sellers call out in voices softened by heat. Flies gather with annoying dedication. Customers press bulbs in their hands, judging firmness by touch. A good onion should not sag, should not smell rotten, should not betray weakness. The outer skin crackles. The bulb feels compact, layered, alive in its quiet way. Money, barter, ration, tax, gift, temple due, household supply. The onion passes through all these channels. It belongs to the economy of the ordinary. And there is medicine too, or what ancient people understood as the healing properties of plants. Egyptian medical texts included many plant ingredients, and onions and their relatives were valued in ancient healing traditions. You can imagine a healer crushing onion with other substances, the smell sharp enough to clear the head of anyone nearby, including patients who may have preferred a gentler cure. But strong-smelling plants often suggested strength. They seemed active. They did something you could feel. They warmed the mouth, stirred the nose, brought tears, changed the breath. For people watching the body closely without modern chemistry, that mattered. As the afternoon deepens, the river turns brighter, almost white in the sun. Irrigation channels glitter between plots. Men lift water with simple devices. Women return from gardens with bundles. The rhythm is laborious, but steady. Agriculture here is not a postcard. It is mud, timing, muscle, insects, taxes, floods that may bless or fail, officials who arrive with lists, and meals that must stretch. Through it all, onions will remain useful because they are small enough for daily life and strong enough to be remembered. Even their tears make sense here. Cut an onion and the air itself seems to answer. Eyes water, noses prickle, hands pause. The vegetable insists on being noticed. Yet once cooked, it becomes gentle, almost tender, giving sweetness after its first sharpness. That transformation feels at home beside the Nile, where flood becomes field, mud becomes bread, labour becomes monument, and a buried bulb becomes green life. Evening comes softly. The sun lowers behind palms. Smoke rises from hundreds of small fires. The sounds of the settlement change from work to rest, from commands and tools to bowls, low voices, and animals settling into shadows. You sit with bread still warm from the hearth and a stew fragrant with onion. The first taste is simple, earthy, and comforting. Around you, Egypt breathes in layers: river, field, house, shrine, tomb, sky. The onion is woven through them all, not as a grand hero, but as a faithful presence. It feeds hands that build, mouths that pray, bodies that tire, and imaginations that look beyond death. The night air cools. A faint sweetness rises from the fields. Somewhere, a temple lamp flickers. Somewhere, onions hang in storage, drying patiently for days not yet hungry. You hold the bowl close and feel its warmth travel into your palms. The river moves in darkness, steady and slow, carrying reflections of stars that seem almost close enough to touch. In that quiet, the humble bulb becomes more than food. It becomes a small round sign of endurance, layered like life itself, sharp enough to wake the senses, soft enough to comfort the tired, and ordinary enough to belong to everyone. You enter a Greek market at daybreak, when the stones are still cool and the shadows lie long between stalls. The air is awake before the people fully are. Sandaled feet scrape across the ground. Pottery clinks. A goat bleats as if personally offended by philosophy. Vendors lift reed mats from baskets, revealing figs, olives, fish, herbs, coarse bread, and onions piled in pale, dusty heaps. The smell is layered and lively. Brine from the fish tables, olive oil warming in clay jars, wool, sweat, damp rope, crushed mint, smoke from little charcoal fires. Then the onion rises through everything, sharp and green at first, then deeper where bulbs have been bruised by handling. You feel the dry skin crackle beneath your thumb as you pick one up. It is firm, humble, and faintly dusty, a small globe that has travelled from garden soil to public argument. Because this is Greece, even buying vegetables can happen near a debate. Somewhere nearby, men discuss justice, poetry, weather, taxes, and which neighbour has become unbearable. A topic that never goes out of style. Yet the onion does not care about rhetoric. It sits quietly in its basket, waiting for a stew pot, a soldier's bag, a doctor's mixture, or a poor person's dinner. In a world famous for marble temples and clever speeches, the onion remains wonderfully unimpressed. A plain historical truth rests here among the stalls. Onions were common foods in the ancient Greek and Roman worlds. They were cultivated, sold, eaten by ordinary households, carried by soldiers, and discussed by writers interested in agriculture, medicine, and diet. They belonged to the daily meal more than the banquet fantasy. Not every table glittered with imported delicacies. Many meals were built from bread, legumes, greens, oil, wine, salt fish, cheese when available, and strong vegetables that could make simple food taste alive. You walk past a baker's stall where loaves are stacked in rough circles. A woman tears one open, still warm enough to breathe steam. She buys onions and tucks them into a cloth with a handful of olives. Her fingers are work-worn, nails darkened from the day's tasks already begun. This meal will not enter epic poetry. Nobody will compare it to the rage of Achilles. Yet it is the kind of meal that keeps feet moving, children fed, and houses awake. Beyond the market, You step into a small courtyard kitchen. The walls are sun-faded. A clay hearth glows with coals. Someone slices onions with a short knife, and the air suddenly sharpens. Your eyes sting. The cook blinks, sniffs, and continues. Because civilization has always depended on people doing mildly annoying things for dinner. The onion pieces hit hot oil with a soft hiss. A sweeter scent begins to gather, blending with lentils, coriander, vinegar, and fish sauce in the Roman style, or with barley, herbs, and cheese in a simpler Greek pot. The sound is restful in its own busy way. A wooden spoon taps the side of a vessel. A child runs past and is told to slow down. A neighbour calls over a wall. Somewhere, a rooster insists that dawn is still his personal achievement. The steam warms your face. The stone floor is cool underfoot. The household feels small, practical, and full of motion. And the onion makes the meal smell complete long before anyone eats it. In Greek thought, food was never just food. It belonged to ideas about balance, strength, digestion, climate, character, and the body's hidden moods. Physicians in the Hippocratic tradition paid attention to diet as a tool for health, and strong plants such as onions could be considered heating, stimulating, or useful in particular conditions. Later writers, including Roman authors, repeated and expanded such ideas. Onion could be food, but also remedy. That double life gave it an interesting social position. It was ordinary enough for a worker's bowl, yet powerful enough to attract medical opinion, which is a neat promotion for something that grows underground. You pause beside a training ground where athletes move through dust in the morning light. Their bodies shine with oil. The air smells of sweat, sand, leather, and crushed plants. Trainers shout instructions. Feet thud against packed earth. Here the onion earns one of its stranger ancient reputations. A quirky tidbit passed down in ancient sources says that Greek athletes may have eaten onions, drunk onion juice, or rubbed onion preparations on their bodies as part of training and strength rituals. Whether every athlete did this is doubtful, and the image is almost too vivid, a contestant prepared for glory, smelling like a salad that has developed ambition. Still, the idea makes sense in its own ancient way. Onions feel potent. They bite the tongue. They wake the eyes. They seem to heat the body from the inside. To people watching performance, endurance, and appetite without modern sports science. The onion looked like a little engine of vigour. You can imagine a young athlete swallowing a harsh mouthful and pretending not to regret it, because pride has always been a powerful seasoning. Across the sea and centuries, you find yourself on a Roman road, hard under your sandals, pale with dust, stretching from one settlement to another with relentless confidence. The Romans loved roads as much as they loved rules, armies, aqueducts, and telling everyone else how roads should be made. A soldier marches with a pack biting into his shoulders. The leather strap rubs his skin. In his provisions, there may be grain, hard bread, cheese, vinegar, dried goods, garlic, and onions or onion-like alliums. Food that travels matters to an empire. A vegetable that can flavour rations becomes a quiet companion to expansion. At camp, the evening meal forms around smoke and iron. Men grind grain, boil porridge, sharpen tools, curse softly, laugh loudly, and argue about officers. A pot bubbles. Onion is chopped into it, not delicately, not poetically, but efficiently. The smell cuts through horse sweat and damp wool. It makes the stew feel less like survival and more like supper. You hold a wooden bowl in your hands and feel the heat seep into your fingers. The taste is salty, rough, and satisfying. The onion has no interest in elegance here. Its purpose is comfort with discipline. In Rome itself, the market is louder, heavier, and more crowded. You enter a world of shouting sellers, mule carts, taverns, apartment blocks, public fountains, and narrow streets where smells collide without asking permission. fresh bread, frying food, sewage, perfume, incense, damp stone, spilled wine, and fish sauce all compete for attention. Onions sit in baskets among cabbages, leeks, garlic, and herbs. They are cheap enough to be ordinary but useful enough to be everywhere. You pass a thermopolium, a kind of ancient fast food counter, where jars are set into a stone surface and warm food waits for customers who do not have grand kitchens at home. Many urban Romans lived in crowded apartment buildings where cooking could be difficult, smoky, or dangerous. The smell of prepared food drifting into the street is inviting. Onion may be tucked into stews, sauces, vegetable dishes, or relishes. A worker steps in, pays, eats, and returns to the noise. The meal is brief, but the flavour lingers. Roman writers could be snobbish about food, because writers have never been immune to judging everyone else's dinner. Some associated strong-smelling vegetables with rustic life, poverty, soldiers, labourers, or old-fashioned virtue. The onion could be praised for usefulness and mocked for breadth. There is something wonderfully democratic about a vegetable that nourishes you and then announces itself socially for hours. Fine manners may prefer perfume, but hunger has its own priorities. You visit a country farm described in the imagination of Roman agricultural writers. The soil is worked in rows. The air is drier away from the city, scented with straw, manure, sun-warmed herbs, and turned earth. Onions grow in kitchen gardens, close to other practical crops. Farmers know the value of timing sowing, thinning, watering, lifting, drying, storing. The bulbs are not merely tossed into history by accident. They require attention. Their skins must dry. Their necks must cure. Moisture must be watched, because rot is a quiet thief. There is scholarly uncertainty in the language itself. Specialists continue to puzzle over ancient words for onions, leeks, scallions, garlic, and related alliums, because Greek and Latin plant names do not always match modern categories neatly. When a writer mentions a certain bulb or green shoot, the exact species may not be obvious. Translation can make the ancient pantry look tidier than it was. The past rarely labels its vegetables for our convenience. It simply cooks them and leaves us to argue politely, or not so politely, in footnotes. In medical and natural history writings, onions gather a whole cupboard of supposed powers. They are said to stir appetite, loosen the body, affect sleep, sharpen desire, improve or disturb the stomach, and help with various complaints depending on the author, preparation, and level of confidence. Some claims sound practical. Others wander into the charmingly excessive. Ancient medicine often mixed observation, tradition, theory, and optimism, much like a stew that has invited every herb in the garden. You sit for a moment in a Roman dining room that belongs to someone comfortable but not imperial. The couches are arranged, lamps burn with soft, oily light. The table carries bread, olives, eggs, vegetables, cheese, perhaps fish, perhaps wine watered to taste. Onion appears in a sauce, chopped with herbs, vinegar, and salt. It brightens the plate. It is not the star, but without it the food would feel flatter, quieter, less awake. You touch the rim of a cup, smooth from use, and listen to low conversation, the clatter of serving dishes, the faint crackle of lamp flame. What is most soothing here is the onion's ability to move across rank without changing its nature. A philosopher may complain about luxury while eating something seasoned with onion. A soldier may chew it beside a ditch. A farmer may store it in a cool room. A doctor may prescribe it. A cook may rely on it. A wealthy diner may accept it when disguised in a clever sauce. The onion does not belong to one class, one city, or one theory of the body. It slips through all of them. Night settles over the Mediterranean world. In Greece, the market stones release the heat of the day. In Rome, tavern lamps glow along crowded lanes. In a farm kitchen, Bulbs hang from rafters in loose braids, their skins whispering when the air moves. You breathe in smoke, oil, wine, dust, and onion, and the whole ancient world feels less distant. Not marble white, not silent, not frozen in museum calm, but warm, noisy, fragrant, and hungry. The onion rests at the centre of that human reality. It gives strength to the plain meal, sharpness to medicine, humour to social life, and comfort to tired bodies. It makes eyes water, breath bold, and soup better. A modest achievement, perhaps, but civilization has always been built partly from modest achievements. As you walk away under a sky pricked with stars, the markets grow quiet, the cooking fires sink lower, and the papery skins in their baskets rustle faintly, like little dry leaves whispering that history is not only made by emperors, sometimes it is made by dinner. You follow the smell before you see the road. It is not one smell, of course. Roads never carry only one thing. The air holds camel sweat, sun-baked wool, leather straps, dry grass, old smoke, dust, and the faint sourness of packed provisions. But under it all comes a sharper scent, tucked into saddlebags and baskets, riding quietly across the wide spaces of Asia. Onions travel with the caravans, not as jewels, not as silk, not as spices worth a prince's attention, but as the patient food of people who need dinner at the end of a long day. The morning is cold in the high country. Frost clings to the edges of scrub plants, and your fingers ache when you close them around a rope. Hooves crunch over gravel. Bells tied to pack animals make a soft, irregular music. Never quite a song, never quite silence. The horizon is enormous. Mountains stand blue and hard in the distance, and the sky seems too large for human thoughts. A merchant coughs into his sleeve. A driver mutters to a stubborn camel. Someone laughs because the camel has made its opinion of commerce very clear. You walk with them along one of the great inland routes that later generations will call the Silk Roads. The name sounds elegant, almost delicate, as if everyone glided across Asia in embroidered robes while discussing poetry. The reality is rougher and more interesting. These routes are not a single road, but a web of tracks, towns, passes, river valleys, deserts, and oasis markets. Silk moves here, yes, but so do horses, paper, glass, metalwork, stories, diseases, songs, pilgrims, seeds, recipes, and stubborn vegetables that refuse to stay in one region. A mainstream fact settles into the dust around your feet. Onions and their allium relatives became important across Eurasia, spreading through farming, migration, trade, and local adaptation. By the ancient and medieval periods, many societies from Central Asia to India and China used onion-like plants in cooking and medicine. The bulb onion, along with garlic, leeks, chives, scallions, and regional wild alliums, joined the practical toolkit of kitchens and healers. This was not glamorous trade, but it mattered. A bulb that could flavour grain, meat, beans, or broth had real value on routes where food often meant survival with a side of grit. You reach an oasis town as the afternoon turns gold. The first sign is not the wall or the gate, but the smell of water, damp earth, green leaves, animal dung softening near irrigation channels. Date palms lift their crowns over gardens where small plots crowd together in precious shade. The touch of the air changes against your skin. It is still dry, but less cruel. You hear water being lifted and poured, wooden wheels creaking, children calling, traders bargaining in languages that slide past one another like streams. In the market, onions sit beside melons, grapes, flatbread, dried apricots, walnuts, and sacks of grain. Some bulbs are small and strong, some greens are bundled fresh, their roots still muddy. A seller splits one open with a knife, and the scent leaps upward, bright and demanding. Your eyes prickle at once. The seller grins as if this proves the quality. Maybe it does. If a vegetable can attack you from a market stall, at least it is not bland. Here, the onion becomes part of exchange without needing to be rare. Rarity is not the only kind of power. Everyday usefulness spreads things too. A caravan cook buys a bundle because tonight there will be rice, millet, or wheat boiled in a pot, and something sharp must make it taste like a meal instead of a punishment invented by geography. A gardener saves bulbs because they grow well in irrigated soil. A healer keeps them because strong-smelling plants feel active in the body. A pilgrim eats them gratefully, then worries whether the smell is suitable before entering a sacred place. Humanity is complicated. So is breath. You sit near a caravanserai wall where the plaster is warm from the day's sun. The courtyard fills slowly. Animals kneel with heavy sighs. Packs are loosened. Men and women stretch sore shoulders. The ground smells of dust and dung. But the cooking fires begin to soften it with smoke and food. A pot is set over flame. Onions are cut on a board darkened by years of meals. The knife makes a dull tapping sound. Pieces fall into oil or fat, and suddenly the courtyard feels less like a stop on a trade route and more like a temporary home. The onions sizzle, their sharpness bends into sweetness. Cumin may join them, or coriander, or mountain herbs, or a pinch of something carried from far away at ridiculous effort. Lentils thicken. Mutton, if available, releases its richness. Rice swells. Steam touches your face and leaves a faint dampness on your lips. Around you, conversation slows. The road has a way of making people practical, but the smell of cooking makes them human again. In India, you enter a very different heat. The air is heavier, full of monsoon damp or dry season dust, depending on where your feet have landed. You move through a town where temple bells ring in the distance and vegetable sellers call from shaded stalls. Onions are heaped in baskets, red and purple skins glowing like small dust-coloured planets. Your hand brushes them, and the papery skins whisper. A cook squats near a grinding stone, crushing spices into paste. The smell is astonishing: mustard seed, ginger, asafoetida, smoke, ghee, green chilies, and onion softening into a base that will carry everything else. Yet here, the onion also steps into the world of belief. In many South Asian religious and philosophical traditions, especially among some Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist communities, onions and garlic have been avoided in certain diets. They may be considered too stimulating, too heating, too tied to bodily desire, or simply unsuitable for ritual purity. At the same time, countless households have cooked with them daily, and medical traditions have valued them in different preparations. So the onion becomes a little theological troublemaker. It feeds the body beautifully, then gets accused of exciting it too much. Honestly, for a vegetable, that is quite a reputation. A quirky tidbit rests in this tension. Some religious cooks created entire cuisines of astonishing depth while avoiding onions and garlic completely, using asafoetida, ginger, cumin, fennel, coconut, curry leaves, and toasted spices to build flavour instead. The result is not absence, but invention. You lean over a temple kitchen where onion is not allowed, and the air still smells rich enough to make anyone humble. Lentils bubble, rice steams, brass vessels shine from repeated scrubbing. Bare feet move quickly over cool stone. The food is devotional, disciplined, fragrant, and proof that humans can turn dietary restriction into art, which is very noble and also very helpful when dinner is still expected. Historians still argue whether particular ancient Indian references point to the true bulb onion, to related alliums, or to broader categories of pungent roots and greens. Texts speak through old names, regional habits, and changing meanings. A word that seems clear in translation may have shifted across centuries. The plant in a physician's recipe, a monk's warning, or a cook's memory might not always be the exact onion you picture in your hand. The past is generous with flavour but stingy with labels. Farther east, you walk into Chinese gardens where order and variety meet. Rows of greens stand in damp soil. The smell is fresh, mineral, and alive. Bamboo leaves click gently in the wind. Water runs through channels with a careful murmur. In northern kitchens, wheat dough is rolled and stretched, while chopped scallions or onions sharpen pancakes, dumplings, broths, and sauces. In other regions, alliums join ginger and other aromatics in the first breath of cooking, released into hot oil until the kitchen wakes. Chinese food history includes many onion relatives, including scallions, Chinese chives, garlic, leeks, and later familiar bulb onions in different places and periods. The exact family tree of what was grown where can be tangled, but the role is clear enough when you stand beside the stove. The cook heats oil. A handful of chopped allium goes in. The sound is immediate, a quick, fragrant hiss. Your stomach understands before your mind finishes taking notes. This is the opening chord of a meal. You pass a Buddhist monastery where the mood changes again. The path is swept clean. Incense drifts in slow threads. Wooden beams are smooth beneath your fingertips, polished by years of touch. A bell sounds, low and soft, and the vibration seems to rest inside your chest. In some monastic traditions, pungent alliums were discouraged or forbidden because they were believed to disturb meditation, excite the senses, or create social unpleasantness in close quarters. A fair concern, really. If everyone is sitting silently in a hall and one person has eaten raw onion, enlightenment may have to wait. Still, outside such disciplined spaces, the onion and its relatives keep working. They are chopped into noodles, tucked into breads, simmered with lamb, layered into dumplings, and dried for storage. In Central Asian homes, onions meet meat and grain with deep satisfaction. In Persianate gardens and kitchens, they join herbs, sour fruits, rice, and stews. In mountain villages, they are hung from rafters where cold air keeps them firm. In desert towns, they are cherished because flavour matters most when choices are few. The Silk Roads do not make the onion famous in the way they make silk famous. No emperor dreams of an onion robe. No poet compares moonlight to a sack of storage bulbs, though perhaps someone should have tried. Instead, onions travel through the quieter channels of need, memory, and taste. A cook learns from another cook. A seed moves in a pouch. A bulb is planted near a well. A recipe adjusts to local soil. A forbidden food becomes a sign of discipline in one kitchen and the foundation of comfort in another. As night lowers over the caravanserai, the stars appear with startling brightness. You sit on a woven mat, its fibres rough against your palm. The air cools quickly. Fires blink around the courtyard. Somewhere, a pilgrim chants softly. Somewhere, a merchant counts coins. Somewhere, a cook scrapes the bottom of a pot where onions have browned and clung, leaving the best flavour in the most inconvenient place, because onions are generous but not always cooperative. You lift a warm bowl. The scent rises: grain, fat, spice, smoke, onion. It carries fields, roads, gardens, vows, arguments, and appetites. It belongs to no single faith, and yet touches sacred life again and again. It crosses borders without caring what they are called. It enters humble kitchens and refined ones, caravan meals and monastery rules, market baskets and medical texts. The onion does not demand belief. It simply asks to be noticed, and then it changes the meal. The road grows quiet. Animals settle. The last voices fade into murmurs. Above you, the constellations seem fixed, but everything beneath them moves: people, plants, customs, tastes, warnings, permissions, recipes. The onion moves with them, wrapped in skins thin as paper, carrying its sharp little weather inside. You close your eyes and hear the faint creak of harness, the soft hiss of a dying fire, the whisper of bulbs shifting in a basket. Somewhere in the darkness, another kitchen begins, and the first thing to meet the heat is Onion. You step onto a damp medieval path where the morning fog hangs low over the fields, softening the outlines of cottages, hedges, and distant church towers. The earth is dark from recent rain. It clings to your shoes in heavy patches and releases a cool, mineral smell with every step. Somewhere, a rooster calls with more enthusiasm than accuracy. A cartwheel creaks through ruts. Sheep shift behind a hurdle, their wool carrying the scent of lanolin, straw, and weather. The village is waking in small sounds. A doorbar lifts. A bucket knocks against a wellstone. Someone coughs in the smoky dimness of a house where the fire never quite goes out. From a low garden plot beside a cottage wall, green onion tops lean in the mist. They are not glamorous plants, but they are dependable, which in this world may be the finest compliment available. The medieval table is shaped by season's status and survival. Bread is central, pottage is everywhere. Ale or small beer is common in many regions. Meat appears more often for the wealthy, for feast days, or for households with access to animals, hunting rights, or markets. For most villagers, daily cooking depends on grains, peas, beans, cabbages, herbs, leeks, garlic, and onions. A mainstream historical fact is simple enough to hold in your palm. Onions were a common garden crop across much of medieval Europe. Valued because they were flavourful, useful in humble dishes, and easier to store than many tender greens. You pass a strip of garden behind a cottage. It is fenced against wandering animals, although the fence looks as if one determined pig could defeat it by lunchtime. The soil has been worked by hand. Onions grow near leeks, cabbages, parsley, sage, beans, and perhaps medicinal herbs whose uses are half practical and half hopeful. The green stems are slick with dew. When you brush them with your fingers, the smell rises instantly, sharp and alive, cutting through the wet morning like a tiny kitchen bell. A woman kneels in the garden, skirts tucked up from the mud, her hands are red from cold water and work. She loosens a bulb carefully, shakes soil from its roots, and sets it in a basket lined with straw. She's not thinking about food history. She's thinking about the next meal, the next week, the next hungry mouth. Her knowledge is local and exact. Which patch drains badly, which bulbs should be used soon, which can dry and keep, which leaves can be cut green before the bulb is ready. It is scholarship without parchment. Inside the cottage, the air is thick with smoke because the roof hole is doing its best, which is not quite enough. Your eyes sting a little. The floor is packed, earth scattered with rushes. The walls smell of damp wood, soot, wool, and stored food. A pot hangs over the fire, blackened by years of use. Into it go water, grain, peas, herbs, perhaps a little bacon if fortune is being unusually charming, and chopped onions. The knife is small and worn. The board is scarred. The onion makes its bright little protest as it is cut, and the room fills with its scent. Soon the pot begins to murmur. Pottage is not a glamorous word, but it is a deeply human one. It can be thin or thick, plain or rich, depending on the household and the season. Onion gives it warmth. It deepens the taste. It helps turn necessity into something closer to comfort. You hold your hands toward the fire and feel heat on your palms while the rest of the room stays damp at the edges. Outside, rain taps softly on thatch. Inside, steam curls up carrying onion, smoke, peas, and the faint sweetness of grain. You walk toward the manor fields, where labour stretches in long furrows beneath a grey sky. Medieval agriculture is not one neat picture. It changes by region, century, climate, and custom. Yet the rhythm of work is steady enough to feel in your bones. Ploughing, sowing, weeding, harvesting, gleaning, carting, threshing, storing. The onion belongs mostly to the smaller scale of gardens, crofts, and market plots, but it shares the same harsh arithmetic. Weather can bless or betray. Too much rain rots. Too little rain stunts. Frost bites. Insects arrive. Taxes do not politely wait for a good harvest, because taxes have never been famous for tenderness. By midday, the village lane smells of wet straw, animals, hearth smoke, and cooked vegetables. A peddler passes with pins, ribbons, rough cloth, and news whose accuracy may be negotiable. Children chase one another near a ditch. A dog noses hopefully at a doorway. The church bell marks time across the fields, its sound rolling through mist and over roofs. In a house where the meal is ready, bowls are filled. The pottage is brownish, greenish, not exactly beautiful. But the onion has done its quiet work. It gives the dish a savoury base, the kind that makes people eat a little slower, even when tired. There is a quirky medieval tidbit tucked into household lore, and medical belief onions were sometimes used not just for eating, but also in remedies, charms, and practical treatments that mixed observation with superstition. A cut onion might be placed near a sick bed, applied in poultices, or combined with other ingredients for coughs, swellings, or bites. Some people believed strong-smelling plants could draw out corruption or repel harmful forces. Was it medicine? Was it magic? Often, yes to both, because medieval life did not always keep those boxes separate. Very efficient, really. If your pantry can season soup and frighten invisible trouble, you enter the monastery through a gate where the mood changes, though the smell of onions does not politely disappear. Stone walls hold the chill. Your fingertips meet rough masonry, damp in shaded places. The cloister walks are quiet except for the soft slap of sandals and the far murmur of chanting. In the garden, raised beds lie in measured order. Monks tend herbs, vegetables, fruit trees, and medicinal plants. Their lives are governed by prayer, labour, reading, and routine, which sounds peaceful until you remember that routine includes winter, toothache, and washing in very cold water. Monastic communities helped preserve and organise agricultural knowledge in many parts of medieval Europe. Gardens attached to monasteries could grow food for the kitchen, herbs for the infirmary, and plants for hospitality. Onions and leeks were practical choices, especially in regions where they thrived. They could flavour simple meals that fit religious rules, particularly on days when meat was restricted. A bale of beans or greens becomes much more persuasive when onions have been allowed to soften slowly in fat or oil, assuming the rule, the season, and the cellar permit it. You stand near the monastery kitchen, where silence is less strict because pots are loud and cooks have opinions. The room is warm, smoky, and busy. Steam beads on the stone. The smell of baking bread mixes with boiled vegetables, ale, dried fish, herbs, and onions. A lay brother lifts a lid, and a cloud of fragrant steam rises into his face. He blinks with the expression of a man who has been personally addressed by lunch. Wooden ladles knock against cauldrons, dough slaps a board, knives chop in steady rhythm. In the storage rooms, onions hang in bunches or rest in bins where air can move around them. The space is cool and dim. It smells of dried herbs, apples, straw, old wood, and the faint papery musk of bulbs. You hear the tiny crackle of skins when a basket is shifted. This is the quiet architecture of endurance, the cellar, the loft, the pantry, the barn. Civilization survives the cold months not only through harvest, but through storage. Food must be kept away from damp, rats, mold, and careless hands. An onion that stores well is not merely a vegetable. It is a little insurance policy with layers. Researchers still disagree over how to identify every onion-like plant in medieval records, because words such as onion, leek, scallion, and garlic could shift across languages and local usage. Manuscripts might use Latin terms, vernacular names, or broad categories that do not match modern botany neatly. A kitchen list may look clear until a specialist leans over it and quietly ruins your confidence. The bulb on the page may be familiar, or it may be a cousin wearing the same historical coat. At the monastery infirmary, the onion takes on another role. Shelves hold jars, dried roots, bundles of herbs, wax, cloth, honey, vinegar, and oils. The air smells bitter, sweet, dusty, and medicinal. A monk trained in healing traditions might prepare a mixture for cough, digestion, or skin troubles. Medieval medicine draws from classical authorities, local practice, religious care, and experience. Onion is strong, warming, pungent. It seems to act, brings tears, heat, and sensation, and that makes it hard to ignore. Even when a treatment does little, the patient at least knows something dramatic has happened. The onion never enters quietly. In town, onion sellers gather on market day beneath cloth awnings that sag with rainwater. The mud is lively underfoot, which is a polite way of saying unpleasant. Bells ring. Pigs squeal. A blacksmith's hammer strikes iron in bright, clean notes. The butcher's stall smells of blood and straw, while the baker's table smells like the dream of a better afternoon. Onion baskets sit between root vegetables and herbs. Buyers squeeze bulbs, sniff suspiciously, haggle, and count coins. A good onion must be firm. A bad one announces itself in a way nobody enjoys discussing near breakfast. By evening, the medieval world contracts around firelight. The fields fade into darkness. The manor hall glows with rushlights and louder eating. The village cottage glows with embers and softer talk. The monastery refectory gathers its community in order and restraint. In each place, the onion can appear differently chopped into peasant pottage, cooked with fish for a fasting meal, stewed with meat in a wealthier kitchen, minced into sauces and brewed into remedies, dried against winter. You sit near a small hearth while rain whispers down the thatch. The bowl in your hands is rough pottery, warm at the bottom, chipped along the rim. The pottage inside is simple, but the onion has made it feel cared for. Its sweetness has slipped into the grain and greens. Its sharpness has faded into comfort. Outside, the lane is mud, the roofs drip, the animals breathe in their sheds. But here, within the smoke-dark room, the meal has weight and warmth. The medieval onion teaches a quiet lesson. It is not the food of triumphal procession. It is the food of continuance. It belongs to hands that weed in cold soil, to monks who count winter stores, to cooks who stretch a pot for unexpected guests, to healers who trust strong smells, and to families who know that hunger is easier to face when dinner has flavour. In its papery skin, it carries damp fields, stone kitchens, market noise, and the patient skill of people who learned how to live with uncertainty. You breathe in the scent rising from the bowl, and the night settles gently around the walls. You enter the city through a gate washed in pale morning light, where dust rises under hooves and sandals, and the air hums with the soft confusion of many lives beginning at once. Above you, walls glow warm from the sun. Ahead, narrow streets bend into shade, then open suddenly into courtyards where fountains murmur over patterned stone. Water is everywhere and small. Careful motions trickling through channels, flashing in basins, cooling tiles, feeding gardens that smell of mint, rose, damp soil, and crushed green stems. Then the kitchens wake. From behind carved wooden screens and plastered walls comes the scent of onions meeting hot fat. It is immediate and confident, sliding into the morning air with cumin, cinnamon, coriander, saffron, vinegar, lamb, chickpeas, and fresh herbs. A ladle strikes the rim of a bronze pot. A baker slaps dough against the wall of an oven. A donkey passes with baskets, moving as if it has serious thoughts about public policy. Somewhere a vendor calls out the price of vegetables, stretching the words so sweetly that even the onions sound expensive. You're in the medieval Islamic world, not one place, not one people, but a wide, shifting belt of cities, farms, deserts, courts, ports, gardens, school, kitchens and caravan roads, Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo, Cordoba, Fez, Isfahan, Samarkand, and many smaller towns pulse with trade and learning. The onion fits this world beautifully because it is both modest and sophisticated. It can feed a labourer at dawn, perfume a courtly stew at dusk, and appear in the careful notes of physicians and agricultural writers who believe the natural world deserves close attention. A mainstream historical fact rests in the warm light of these streets. Onions were common and important ingredients in medieval Islamic cuisines, and they appeared in cookbooks, medical writing, and agricultural manuals across Arabic, Persian, and Andalusi traditions. They were grown in irrigated gardens, sold in markets, used in sauces and stews, and treated as foods with qualities that affected the body. The onion had range. Very few vegetables managed to be pantry staple, medical subject, and social inconvenience all at once. You pass into a market where awnings cast striped shadows on the ground. Baskets of onions sit beside cucumbers, eggplants, gourds, carrots, herbs, pomegranates, citrus, and sacks of lentils. The bulbs are red, white, golden, and small, their skins dry enough to whisper when touched. A merchant holds one up, cuts it open, and lets the scent speak for itself. Your eyes begin to water, which apparently counts as persuasive advertising. Around you, copper scales swing, coins click, flies hover, and shoppers press vegetables with practiced fingers. They are not fooled by pretty skins. They know rot hides where softness begins. The market is not merely a place to buy food. It is a classroom of appetite. You hear Arabic, Persian, Berber, Greek, Romance tongues, Turkic speech, and the practical language of pointing at a better price. Ingredients travel from field to stall, from stall to kitchen, from kitchen to memory. Onions pass through these hands daily. They may be minced into sauces with vinegar and herbs, fried until golden, stuffed, pickled, boiled with meat, pounded into seasoning pastes, or used as a base beneath spices whose names make the air feel richer. You enter a palace kitchen and the scale changes. The room is large, hot, disciplined, and fragrant enough to make sleepiness feel luxurious. Fires glow beneath enormous pots. Steam clouds the upper air. Servants move with trays, knives, bowls, and jars. The touch of the stone floor is cool where water has been splashed, but heat presses against your cheeks near the hearth. A cook slices onions quickly, almost musically, the blade tapping wood in a steady rhythm. Another watches them soften in fat, waiting for the right colour, not pale, not scorched, but sweet and deep enough to carry the rest of the dish. Courtly cookbooks from the medieval Islamic world show an elaborate cuisine, especially among wealthy households and rulers. Recipes use meat, poultry, grains, legumes, fruits, nuts, spices, herbs, souring agents, and perfumed ingredients. Onion often appears not as decoration, but as structure. It begins the dish. It thickens the sauce. It absorbs meat juices. It melts into the background until the final taste seems inevitable, as if the stew has always known what it wanted to become. There is gentle drama in this. You watch chopped onions turn glossy, then translucent, then golden. Their sharp smell relaxes, sweetness appears, cumin follows, then black pepper, then perhaps a hint of cinnamon or dried coriander. Lamb browns at the edges. Chickpeas roll softly in the pot. Someone adds a splash of vinegar or pomegranate juice, and the whole kitchen brightens. The dish will be served in a glazed bowl, perhaps with bread to scoop the sauce, perhaps with rice, perhaps with a garnish of herbs. A courtier may praise the balance. A cook, having done the actual work, may simply hope no one asks for impossible changes. But the onion does not live only among courtiers. You leave the palace and walk into a neighbourhood of workshops and small houses. The air is busy with hammering metal, sawing wood, children reciting lessons, and the soft splash of water being drawn from a public fountain. In a modest kitchen, onions are cooked with lentils, beans, or coarse bread. The smell is less perfumed, but just as comforting. A bowl is filled. A worker eats with fingers and bread, leaning against a wall where the plaster is warm from the day. Flavour here is not luxury, it is dignity. The religious life of the city adds another layer, a quirky tidbit, and a very human one, comes from Islamic etiquette around communal prayer. Raw onions and garlic were discouraged before entering the mosque because of their strong smell. The concern was not that onions were wicked little bulbs, plotting spiritual collapse. It was that other worshippers should not have to endure powerful breath in close rows of prayer. Cooked onions were often treated differently, and ordinary food remained ordinary food. Still, the rule gives the onion a strangely moral presence. Eat it. Yes, enjoy it, certainly, but perhaps do not carry its ghost into a crowded sacred space. You pause near a mosque courtyard where water runs in narrow channels for washing. The stone is smooth beneath bare feet. The air is cooler here, washed by shade and order. Voice is lower. A call to prayer rises, clear and bending through the streets. Incense drifts somewhere nearby, faint and woody. The city seems to exhale. In this calm space, the onion's power becomes almost comic. A plant so small that it can flavour a stew, trouble the breath, and require manners before worship. Civilization is built from laws, learning, architecture, and apparently from not making your neighbour suffer through lunch. Beyond the city walls, you enter gardens where agricultural knowledge becomes visible. Irrigation channels divide beds with quiet precision. Fruit trees cast shade over herbs and vegetables. The soil smells dark and wet where water has just passed. Your hand trails along a low wall warmed by the sun. Bees move among flowers. The garden is both useful and beautiful, a place where food, medicine, fragrance, and geometry meet. Onions grow in beds where timing matters, watering, spacing, lifting, drying, saving seed, watching for pests and rot. Medieval Islamic agronomy preserved, translated, tested, and expanded knowledge from Greek, Roman, Persian, Indian, and local farming traditions. Writers describe soils, irrigation, grafting, seasonal planting, fertilizers, and crop varieties. In Al-Andalus, North Africa, the Levant, Iraq, Persia, and Central Asia, farmers adapted crops to microclimates and water systems. The onion benefited from this attention. It was not merely thrown into the ground and wished good luck, though many gardeners have tried that method with mixed emotional results. Specialists still debate how widely elite agricultural instructions reflected ordinary practice among small farmers. Manuals may describe ideal methods, estate management, or specialized knowledge, while village growers relied on inherited local experience. The text may praise careful irrigation and precise timing, while the farmer may glance at the sky, touch the soil, mutter something unrecorded, and do what the field requires. Written knowledge and practical knowledge often overlap, but they are not the same thing. The onion grows in the space between them. You visit a physician's room where shelves hold jars of powders, syrups, oils, dried flowers, roots, seeds, and resins. The atmosphere is cool and faintly bitter, with notes of honey, vinegar, musk, and old paper. Medical writers working within humoral traditions considered foods according to qualities such as heat, cold, moisture, and dryness. Onion, pungent and stimulating, could be discussed as warming, useful, troublesome, or powerful depending on preparation and constitution. Raw onion might be treated differently from cooked onion. The body was imagined as a balance, and the kitchen was part of treatment. A patient sits on a cushion, looking wary as crushed onion is mentioned. You cannot blame them. Even today, when someone says a remedy is strong, it rarely means pleasant and subtle. Yet the onion's intensity made it believable as medicine. It brought tears, heat, appetite, and movement. It announced itself in the mouth and nose. People trusted what they could feel, especially in a world where the body was mysterious and illness could arrive like bad weather. As evening spreads over the city, lamps begin to glow. The market softens from shouting into murmuring. The last vegetable sellers gather unsold bundles. A cook buys onions at a lower price and looks pleased in a restrained, professional way. In a courtyard house, water cools the air. Cushions are arranged. Bread is stacked under cloth. A dish arrives fragrant with onion, chickpeas, herbs, and spices. You tear bread and scoop carefully. The sauce is warm, savoury, bright at the edges, sweet beneath. The onion has vanished into the hole, yet everything depends on it. The night feels blue and deep. Somewhere, scholars discuss texts under a lamplight. Somewhere, gardeners close a gate. Somewhere, worshippers leave the mosque with clean hands and quiet steps. Somewhere, a palace cook finally sits down, probably near the least comfortable wall, because kitchens are not famous for rewarding genius with cushions. The onion rests in baskets, in cellars, in market shadows, in the breath of those who ate it too boldly, and in the memory of meals shared under patterned ceilings. You linger beside a fountain where the water keeps speaking softly to the dark. The smell of rose and damp stone mixes with the last trace of cooked onion drifting from a nearby house. This world has given the humble bulb a place among spice, scholarship, devotion, and garden science. Not a throne, exactly. Onions are not throne-shaped, but a steady place, a necessary place, close to the fire, close to the hand, close to hunger and healing. You breathe in the cooling air, and the city settles around you, layered like a bulb, fragrant with life. You wake to the sound of rigging in the dark, a soft clatter above you like bones made of rope and wind. The ship breathes around you. Timber creaks, canvas snaps. Water slaps the hull with a slow, heavy rhythm, then breaks into white whispers along the side. The air smells of salt, tar, wet wood, stale wool, bilge water, smoke from the galley, and stored food packed tightly against time. In a corner of the hold, beneath nets and barrels and bundles of dried goods, onions wait in sacks. Their papery skins rustle whenever the ship rolls. They are not precious like silver coins, not mysterious like spices, not impressive like cannon. But every sailor knows that a voyage is not made only of maps and courage. It is made of what can survive weeks at sea without turning into something green, furry, and deeply regrettable. You step carefully between barrels. The deck tilts under your feet. Your hand grips a rough beam sticky with tar and salt. In the dim light, the onions look modest, rounded, dusty, a little bruised by travel, yet they carry one of the great food stories of the ocean age. As ships crossed the Atlantic, Indian Ocean, and Pacific in larger numbers, Onions moved with them as provisions, trade goods, seeds, and familiar comforts. European sailors and settlers carried them to distant ports and colonies. At the same time, many parts of the Americas already had wild onion relatives used by indigenous peoples. The result was not a simple arrival of a vegetable into an empty pantry. History is never that tidy, despite what school maps sometimes imply with cheerful arrows. On deck, dawn opens slowly over the sea. The horizon glows pale rose, then gold. Sailors move like shadows at first, then become men with tired faces, cracked hands, and clothes stiffened by salt. A cook crouches near a small galley fire, guarding the flame against the wind. Breakfast is plain hard bread, dried fish perhaps, peas porridge, salted meat, if the barrel has not become too suspicious, and onions chopped into whatever can bear them. The knife hits the board in dull taps. The onion releases its sting, and for a moment the smell is almost fresh enough to compete with the ocean. Freshness matters out here. The sea is vast, beautiful, and extremely bad at providing vegetables on request. Long voyages often meant monotonous food, spoiled water, mouldy bread, and salted provisions that wore down the body. Onions were valued because they stored reasonably well and gave flavour to foods that could otherwise taste like punishment soaked in brine. They also offered some nutrients, although they were no miracle shield against every disease of the sea. Sailors learned painfully that survival required more than courage and a captain with a confident hat. You hear the coughs, you see swollen gums in some mouths, loosened teeth, bruised skin, and the dull exhaustion that haunted long voyages when fresh food disappeared. Today the word scurvy is familiar, but for early ocean travellers it was a terror often explained in confused ways. Citrus fruits would eventually become famous in naval prevention, but many ships tried all sorts of remedies and provisions, including onions, vinegar, sauerkraut, greens, beer, and hopeful nonsense. The onion was useful, yes, but not magical. Very few vegetables enjoy being asked to defeat malnutrition, empire, bad storage, and poor planning all by themselves. Still, sailors appreciated them. An onion could make stale biscuit less miserable, it could cut through fat, it could be eaten raw when hunger overcame manners, cooked into broth when someone was ill, or traded in port for something better. In close quarters, raw onions also announced themselves socially. Imagine a crowded ship, damp hammocks, poor washing, months of sweat. And then someone adds onion breath to the atmosphere. The ocean may be wide, but the deck is not. A quirky tidbit from seafaring life is that onions were sometimes treated as practical charms of freshness as much as food. Sailors prize strong-smelling ingredients because they seem to resist decay and revive appetite. Some shipboard traditions credited pungent foods with clearing the head, strengthening the stomach, or guarding against foul air. Was every belief correct? Not exactly, but when your world is a wooden box crossing uncertain water, a sharp onion can feel like a small argument against rot. You lean over the rail as the ship approaches an island harbour. The smell changes first. Land arrives through the nose-warm vegetation, wet earth, flowers, smoke, and fruit. After weeks of salt and sour barrels, it feels almost unreal. Palms lean above the shore, canoes skim the water, people gather at the edge of contact, curious, cautious, calculating. Goods will be exchanged, taken, misunderstood, desired, stolen, planted, and renamed. The onion enters this meeting quietly, in sacks, in seeds, in memory, and in meals cooked by people far from home. The ocean age spreads plants in all directions: wheat, sugarcane, citrus, bananas, rice, coffee, cacao, potatoes, maize, tomatoes, peppers, cassava, and countless other foods move through trade, conquest, enslavement, migration, and ecological upheaval. Onions are part of that movement, though they do not get the dramatic spotlight. They're too familiar for drama, which is unfair but typical. The humble foods often travel everywhere precisely because people cannot imagine living without them. In the Caribbean and the Americas, cultivated onions brought by Europeans encountered indigenous landscapes already rich with edible plants and wild alliums. Native communities in North America used wild onions, ramps, nodding onions, and other relatives in food and medicine. In some places, settlers learned local plants from indigenous people. In other places, they planted familiar Old World onions because they wanted the taste of home in soil that was not home. This is where food history becomes tender and uneasy at the same time. A garden can be comfort. A garden can also be a sign of occupation. You step into a coastal settlement where the houses smell of pine boards, smoke, brackish marsh, drying fish, and freshly turned earth. The first gardens are small and anxious. Seeds are precious. Tools break. Weather behaves like it has not read the colonist's plans. Onions go into the soil because they are known, useful, and emotionally reassuring. A bulb sprouting green shoots beside a rough house says, perhaps too optimistically, that life can be made orderly here. Women and men tend these plots with tired determination. The soil feels different from the fields they remember. Insects are different. Seasons surprise them. Stored food runs low, yet onion leaves push up, bright and narrow. And the sight brings relief. Chopped into cornmeal, beans, fish stew, or meat broth. Onions help old habits merge with new ingredients. Sometimes the result is cooperation. Sometimes it is necessity. Sometimes it is the beginning of new regional cooking, shaped by hardship, exchange, violence, adaptation, and appetite. Enslaved Africans also carried food knowledge across the Atlantic, under brutal conditions that no soft telling can make gentle. In plantation worlds, onions and alliums became part of cooking shaped by memory, resistance, scarcity, and skill. Gardens tended by enslaved people could include familiar and adopted crops, grow near cabins when permitted, used to supplement rations, sell in markets, or preserve cultural taste. The smell of onion frying with greens, legumes, rice, or salted meat could mean survival, creativity, and the stubborn keeping of self under systems designed to steal everything. Historians continue to debate the exact routes and timing by which particular onion varieties spread across different colonial regions. Written records often mention onions without describing the variety, while local wild species, imported seeds, and related alliums could blur together in practice. A ship manifest may list a barrel, a garden diary may note a planting, an indigenous recipe, an African-influenced stew, and a European kitchen record may all use onion-like plants in different ways. The trail is real, but it branches like roots in damp soil. You move to a port city, where the world feels compressed into noise. Dockworkers shout, blocks creak, waves slap against pilings, barrels roll over planks with hollow thunder, fish guts, tar, spices, rum, wet rope, horse dung, citrus peel, and onion skins mingle in a smell so strong it almost has opinions. Ships from different seas unload their cargo. Onions arrive in crates, leave in carts, appear in taverns, cook shops, street stalls, sailors' lodging houses, and private kitchens. A tavern cook works near a hearth blackened by smoke. She peels onions quickly, dropping skins to the floor where they curl like dry little boats. Into the pan go onions, perhaps with salt pork, beans, or fish. The smell fills the room, and tired sailors turn their heads. It is not luxury calling them. It is warmth. It is something cooked by human hands rather than scraped from a barrel in a storm. Onion also becomes part of shipboard trade because it can be bought cheaply in ports, carried in bulk, and sold or eaten where needed. In some coastal economies, market gardeners grew vegetables specifically for ships and urban customers. Around harbours, small farms supplied onions, cabbages, carrots, herbs, and greens to vessels preparing to leave. The ocean voyage begins in a field long before the anchor rises. Somewhere inland, a gardener kneels in soil. Weeks later, a sailor bites into that garden while waves climb the hull. Night falls at sea again. The deck is slick. Stars scatter across the sky in impossible numbers. The ship rolls under you, slow and uneasy. Below, in the hold, the sacks shift with soft, dry whispers. Some onions will sprout. Some will rot. Some will be saved for landfall. Some will vanish into stew during storms when everyone is too tired to speak. Their skins hold the scent of fields, cellars, ports, hands, hunger, and distance. You sit with a bowl near the galley fire, wrapped in a blanket rough against your neck. The soup is thin but warm. Onion floats in it, softened to sweetness, carrying a taste of earth across water. Around you, the ship creaks like an old animal dreaming. The ocean spreads in every direction, dark and breathing. The onion has crossed it not as a conqueror, not as treasure, but as a companion of ordinary need. It feeds sailors, settlers, captives, traders, gardeners, and cooks who stand at the edges of unfamiliar worlds and try to make a meal from what remains. You enter the town at supper time when the streets are narrow with smoke, wheels, voices, and hunger. Rain has fallen earlier, leaving the stones slick beneath your shoes. The gutters carry straw, onion skins, horse droppings, and scraps of cabbage toward drains that smell as if they have been studying evil for many years. Lanterns glow in windows. Cartwheels clatter over uneven paving. Somewhere, a bell rings the hour, and somewhere else, a vendor shouts that his soup is hot enough to revive the dead, which is ambitious advertising but not entirely impossible. The air is thick with food, fried onions, broth, bread crust, roasted chestnuts, cheap wine, damp wool, cold smoke, human bodies pressed close in lanes where privacy has clearly missed its appointment. You pass taverns, cook shops, market stalls, and doorways where steam escapes in soft clouds. In this world of early modern towns and restless crowds, the onion becomes one of the great engines of cheap flavour. It is chopped into stews, browned in fat, boiled with bones, stirred into porridges, and sold from carts to people who need warmth more than elegance. A mainstream historical fact settles into the steam in many European cities from the 17th through 19th centuries. Onions were widely used in inexpensive urban cooking because they were affordable, easy to store, and powerful enough to flavour thin soups, bread dishes, beans, potatoes, and scraps of meat. They belonged to the tables of workers, soldiers, servants, apprentices, market women, and street sellers. The onion was not a luxury ingredient, it was a democratic one, though not democratic in the voting sense, more in the sense that it entered everyone's nose without asking permission. You pause at a street cart where a woman stirs a pot nearly as wide as her shoulders. Her sleeves are rolled, her hands are rough and reddened from water, cold, and heat. The ladle moves slowly through broth clouded with onion, bread, herbs, and bits of whatever the day has allowed. Steam fogs her face. The smell is deep and savoury, with the sweetness that comes when onions have surrendered their sharpness to the pot. Your fingers close around a wooden bowl, warm and slightly greasy. The first spoonful tastes of salt, smoke, and comfort earned honestly. Street food has its own music. Ladles knock against iron, coins strike palm, boots splash through puddles, customers cough, laugh, bargain, complain, and eat too quickly because hunger is rarely patient. The vendor's cart is not a restaurant. It is a small moving hearth. It brings heat into a public world where many people live in cramped rooms, shared lodging, or workshops without proper kitchens. For them, a bowl of onion soup is not quaint. It is practical survival, served with just enough flavour to make the evening feel less severe. In Paris, the onion finds a particularly famous urban stage. Around the great food markets, especially Les Halles in later centuries, onion soup becomes linked with workers, porters, late-night revellers, and anyone who has made questionable decisions after too much wine. The soup is hot, cheap, salty, and forgiving. Bread thickens it. Cheese may appear for those with more coins or better luck. The onion carries the dish, turning poor ingredients into something that feels almost generous. Paris, never shy about turning necessity into style, eventually gives this humble soup a reputation far grander than its ingredients. A quirky tidbit bubbles here like broth onion soup, gained fame as a late-night restorative, a kind of edible apology after drinking, dancing, arguing, or conducting the kind of social life that makes morning unpleasant. Market workers ate it before dawn, while fashionable people sometimes sought it after long nights. So the same bowl could serve a labourer beginning work and a nobleman ending an evening badly. That is the onion at its finest, quietly uniting society through steam, salt, and mild regret. You move through the market before sunrise, when the lamps burn low and the cold bites the ears. Wagons arrive piled with vegetables, sacks of grain, poultry cages, barrels of fish, and bundles of greens. Onions spill from baskets in pale, golden heaps. The skins crackle under passing feet. The touch of one bulb is cold, firm, and dry in your palm, around you. Market women shout prices with extraordinary force, the kind of voices that could probably frighten weather into improving itself. Markets are political places, even when they seem only noisy. Food prices shape tempers. Bread shortages shake cities. Bad harvests become rumours, then anger, then crowds. In 18th century France, bread was the central food of ordinary people, and high prices and shortages helped fuel unrest. Onions were not the cause of revolution, of course. No one storms a palace because the soup garnish is disappointing, but onions belonged to the food world where scarcity was measured day by day, coin by coin, bowl by bowl. When markets trembled, society trembled with them. You stand among women buying, selling, carrying and arguing, their aprons damp, their baskets heavy, their patience thin. The smell of onions mixes with wet straw and raw fish. A child sleeps against a cartwheel, wrapped in a shawl. A baker's assistant hurries past with flour on his sleeves. News moves faster than horses here. A rumour about grain, a whisper about hoarding, a complaint about officials, a joke about aristocrats who probably think vegetables grow already peeled. The laughter is sharp, but underneath it lies fear. The onion feeds crowds that history often calls mobs, as if hunger were a lack of manners rather than a condition of the stomach. Workers eat onion soup in taverns before marching to labour. Soldiers gulp onion broth in camps, warming hands around cups before the day's drills. Printers, seamstresses, porters, washerwomen, and apprentices all depend on cheap food that can be bought, carried, stretched, reheated, or shared. A pot of onions and broth does not solve inequality, but it lets a person stand a little longer in the cold. In army camps, the onion meets discipline and mud. You walk past rows of tents, muskets stacked, horses steaming in the chill. The ground sucks at your boots, smoke lies low, trapped by damp air. Men gather around kettles where onions are boiled with peas, grains, salted meat, or whatever supplies have arrived late and in poor condition, as supplies love to do. A soldier slices onions with a pocket knife, blinking as the juice bites his eyes. Another teases him for crying, then immediately cries too when handed the knife. Military glory is full of smaller qualities. Armies have always moved on food more than speeches. Rations must be durable, transportable, and capable of becoming something edible under bad conditions. Onions helped because they stored, travelled, and improved the taste of monotony. A general may plan a campaign, but someone still has to chop vegetables in the rain. The smell of onions in a camp kettle is the smell of men trying to remain human inside systems that treat them like numbers, boots, and bayonets. Food historians still debate how far famous onion soups and street dishes were truly people's food from the beginning, and how much later nostalgia dressed them in rustic romance. Recipes printed in cookbooks often reflect literate households, not the full chaos of taverns, market stalls, and poor kitchens. A dish may begin as necessity, become fashionable, and then be remembered as timeless tradition. The onion sits comfortably inside that uncertainty. It does not mind whether the bowl is called humble, national, refined, or rustic. It only asks to be cooked slowly enough to become sweet. You enter a tavern with low beams darkened by smoke. The floor is sticky with spilled ale. Candles gutter in draughts. A fiddler plays near the wall. The tune cheerful enough to make tired people pretend their feet do not hurt. Bowls of onion soup move from hand to hand. Bread is torn. Spoons scrape. Steam rises and fogs the window glass. The room smells of onions browned in fat, sour wine, wool coats, pipe smoke, and wet leather. Here, politics sits beside dinner. A pamphlet is passed under the table. Someone speaks too loudly about taxes. Someone else shushes him. Not because they disagree, but because walls have ears, and sometimes those ears report to officials. The onion has no political party, but it is present where arguments happen, where workers gather, where news is digested along with broth. It is part of the public stomach, and the public stomach has opinions in London, Amsterdam, Madrid, Naples, and other crowded towns. Onions play similar roles in different accents. They join pies, stews, fried fish, sausages, pickles, and sauces. Street sellers carry them roasted or cooked into hot dishes. In port districts, their smell mingles with tar and river mud. In industrial neighbourhoods, they soften the edge of cheap meals eaten after exhausting work. The onion is local everywhere, which is one of its stranger achievements. Every city believes it has made the onion its own, and in a way, every city is right. You pass a print shop where damp paper hangs, ink smells metallic and oily, and a boy with blackened fingers eats bread rubbed with onion. The press thumps inside, steady as a heartbeat. Words are being made faster now, sent into streets where food, rumour, and anger already travel. Outside, a soup seller lifts the lid of her pot, and a cloud of onion steam crosses the lane like a small weather system. A man stops, buys a bowl, reads a notice, frowns, eats, and keeps reading. Revolution, reform, complaint, and digestion proceed together. Evening folds into night. Lanterns tremble in the wind. The market empties slowly, leaving crushed leaves, broken crates, and onion skins stuck to wet stones. The skins are thin and translucent in the lamplight, like scraps of old parchment. A cart rolls away, wheels sighing. A tavern door opens, spilling warmth and noise, then closes again with a wooden thud. Somewhere, another pot is being refilled because hunger has not finished speaking. You hold your bowl close, its heat seeps into your fingers. The spoon is rough against your lips. The soup is simple, but the onions have made it patient and deep. They have taken time, heat, and poverty and turned them into sweetness. Not sweetness like sugar, bright and easy, but the darker kind that comes from endurance. In the restless town, the onion becomes a small comfort for people living through pressure, prices, crowds, soldiers, pamphlets, and rain. It warms the body without pretending to fix the world. It gives flavour to the cheap bowl and courage to the tired hand. Around you, the street grows quieter, but the scent remains in doorways and wool sleeves, in market baskets and tavern beams. It is the smell of ordinary people gathering strength, one spoonful at a time. You step into the age of iron wheels, glass windows, and factory whistles, where the morning no longer begins only with birdsong and hearth smoke. It begins with a horn somewhere beyond the rooftops, a hard mechanical cry that sends workers into streets still grey with mist. The air smells of coal dust, rain on brick, horse manure, machine oil, hot metal, and breakfast frying in narrow kitchens. In that breakfast, as in so many lunches and suppers, onions are already at work. They hit a pan with a hiss. The sound is quick and comforting, almost domestic enough to soften the roar outside. A woman in an apron stirs them with potatoes. A man eats them tucked into bread with sausage. A child wrinkles a nose, then eats anyway, because hunger is a persuasive teacher. The onion, once pulled from garden beds and market baskets, now moves through a world of railways, canneries, warehouses, army depots, lunch counters, and supermarkets. It is still humble, but the systems carrying it are growing enormous. A mainstream historical fact sits plainly in this smoky light. The 19th and 20th centuries transformed onion production and distribution through rail transport, refrigerated storage, mechanized farming, canning, dehydration, and mass retail. Onions could be grown in specialized regions, shipped long distances, stored in climate-controlled spaces, and turned into powders, flakes, soups, sauces, and frozen foods. The bulb did not stop being a kitchen staple. It simply learned to wear a factory badge, which is impressive for something with no pockets. You walk into a processing shed at harvest time. The noise is steady and dry. Conveyor belts rumble. Wooden crates scrape concrete. Workers sort bulbs by size and quality, while loose skins float through the air like pale brown moths. The smell is intense, sharp enough to sting your eyes even without a knife nearby. Under your hand, the onions feel cool, firm, slightly dusty, their skins papery and fragile. Machines lift, shake, trim, and move them. But human eyes still search for rot, bruises, soft spots, and other little betrayals. Outside, fields stretch in disciplined rows. Tractors pull equipment through the soil. Irrigation lines glitter in the sun. The older rhythm of hand labour has not vanished, but it has been joined by engines, fuel, schedules, market prices, and weather reports. The farm is now tied to distant cities. A harvest may be judged not only by taste, but by yield, storage life, uniformity, shipping strength, and whether the bulbs look attractive enough for strangers under bright store lights. The onion, poor thing, has entered the age of presentation. You move to a cannery where steam clouds the ceiling and everything seems damp, metallic, and hot. Tin containers clatter in rows. Labels stack in bright piles. Workers rinse, chop, cook, seal, and pack. Onion-joined soups and sauces meant for shelves in city shops and pantries. The smell is not the gentle scent of one household meal. It is multiplied, industrial, almost overwhelming. Onion turned into atmosphere. Your skin feels sticky from heat. Your ears fill with the rhythm of machinery. Dinner is becoming a product that can wait for months. There is comfort in that. And a little sadness too. A canned soup can feed a tired family quickly. A jarred sauce can help someone with little time make a meal. Dried onion flakes can bring flavour to a camp, a school cafeteria, a diner, or a military kitchen. Yet something changes when the chopping is hidden. The tears happen elsewhere. The skins fall somewhere out of sight. The hand no longer smells of onion at the table. Only the factory's worker's hand does, and perhaps not by choice. A quirky tidbit from the modern food world is that onion powder became one of the quiet champions of packaged flavour. It slips into seasoning blends, chips, crackers, salad dressings, soups, meat rubs, instant noodles, and fast food sauces. Many people who claim they do not like onions are eating onion powder with cheerful ignorance. This is the onion's little disguise, very sneaky, very effective. It removes the dramatic texture, the visible pieces, and much of the crying, then leaves behind a savoury shadow that makes snacks dangerously persuasive. You enter a wartime kitchen, where the atmosphere is tense but orderly. The radio murmurs in the corner, its voice tinny and serious. A kettle rattles on the stove. Windows are covered at night. Sugar, butter, meat, and fuel may be rationed depending on place and year. But onions remain valuable because they stretch flavour when other ingredients are scarce. Chopped into vegetable pies, mixed with potatoes, simmered with beans, or added to broth, they make little seem like more. Their scent fills the room with reassurance, though outside the world feels anything but safe. In army kitchens, the onion is less sentimental and more logistical. You stand near a field cook station where pots are large, hands are hurried, and mud has ambitions of entering everything. The air smells of boiled coffee, diesel, wet canvas, metal, smoke, and onions browning in fat. Soldiers line up with mess tins, boots heavy, shoulders tired. A cook shovels chopped onions into stew or hash, and the smell lifts morale in a way no official speech can quite manage. Speeches are fine, of course, but they rarely improve potatoes. Military rations and institutional cooking helped spread processed onion forms. Dehydrated onion was light, compact, and useful in large-scale meals. It could be stored and rehydrated when needed, bringing flavour without the bulk and spoilage risk of fresh bulbs. The taste might not rival a slow-cooked kitchen onion, but war does not pause for culinary poetry. A small handful of flakes could make soup smell less like duty and more like food. Food historians still argue whether industrial onion products changed everyday taste by replacing fresh preparation, or whether they simply carried older habits into faster, busier lives. Some see standardization, a move toward predictable flavour made in factories. Others see continuity, because people had always dried, stored, chopped, and stretched onions in practical ways. The truth may sit somewhere in the steam between a grandmother's pot and a packet of soup mix. History enjoys doing that, mostly to annoy anyone seeking a clean answer. You step into a mid-century diner where chrome shines beneath fluorescent light. The door opens with a bell. Coffee smells burnt in the familiar way that somehow becomes comforting. On a griddle, onions sizzle beside hamburger patties, hot dogs, peppers, and potatoes. The sound is louder here, a greasy, cheerful crackle. A cook presses them down with a spatula, and sweetness rises from the metal surface. Customers sit at stools with elbows on the counter, reading newspapers, talking weather, or simply staring into space with the quiet dignity of people waiting for lunch. The onion ring appears here as a modern little miracle of texture, sliced into circles, dipped in batter, fried until crisp. It becomes snack side dish, carnival food, drive-in pleasure. The onion's old circular layers turn into golden hoops, delicate at first bite, sweet inside, hot enough to punish impatience. Nobody pretends this is ancient wisdom. It is fried joy, and sometimes that is enough. The crunch echoes softly in your ear, then fades into the smell of oil, salt, and paper napkins. Then the supermarket doors slide open, and the atmosphere changes again. The air is cool, controlled, almost scentless compared with markets of mud and shouting. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, Carts rattle across polished floors. Onions sit in mesh bags, loose bins, red piles, yellow piles, white piles, sweet varieties, storage varieties, small boiling onions, pearl onions in little nets, scallions misted nearby as if they are staying at a spa. Labels give prices, weights, and origins. The old vegetable has become a consumer choice. You pick up a mesh bag. It scratches your palm. Inside, the bulbs are smooth and dry, remarkably uniform. Their skins shine under the lights. There is no farmer nearby to explain the soil, no market woman to slap your hand away from the best bulbs, no donkey contributing opinions. Yet the onion remains intimate. It is still something you will carry home, peel, cut, and smell. The supermarket may wrap food in systems, branding, and barcodes, but the knife will still meet the bulb on a kitchen board. At home, the modern kitchen has its own small orchestra: refrigerator hum, faucet rush, knife tap, pan hiss, exhaust fan sigh. A bag of onions waits in the lower cupboard beside potatoes, though everyone has been warned that storing them together is not always ideal, a fact many households acknowledge and then ignore with impressive commitment. You slice one open, and the old chemistry returns. Eyes water, fingers grow slick, the sharp scent rises, unchanged by all the machines that carried it here. The onion now feeds cities at scales earlier households could scarcely imagine. It enters school lunches, hospital kitchens, airline meals, frozen pizzas, instant soups, street tacos, curry bases, barbecue sauces, deli salads, and jars of pickles. It can be organic, conventional, locally grown, imported, chopped fresh, freeze-dried, caramelized in a pouch, powdered into dust, or hidden in a seasoning packet whose ingredient list reads like a tiny bureaucratic poem. The bulb has become both visible and invisible, whole and processed, local and global, and still it resists complete taming. A bad onion can ruin a bag. A sweet onion can bruise easily. A storage onion can sprout in the dark when forgotten. Prices rise when weather fails. Workers still bend in fields. Tears still come at cutting boards. The onion remains biological, stubbornly alive in a world that prefers neat supply chains. It reminds you that food is not only packaging, it is soil, weather, labour, decay, distance, and the strange comfort of smell. Night settles over the modern street. Apartment windows glow. Delivery bikes pass with soft electric whirs. Somewhere, a factory line slows. Somewhere, a truck carries sacks of onions through the dark. Somewhere, a supermarket worker stacks them into pyramids that will be gently ruined by the first serious shopper. In a quiet kitchen, onions soften in a pan, turning golden at the edges. The smell fills the room slowly, warming the air more tenderly than any machine can. You stand by the stove and listen. The world outside is hurried, lit by screens and engines, but the pan asks for patience. Stir, wait, breathe. The onion turns from sharp to sweet, from firm to yielding, from raw bite to deep comfort. Industrial history has carried it farther, faster, and in more forms than ever. Yet its oldest gift remains close to the hand. It makes food feel like home, even in an age that often forgets where home begins. You stand in a quiet kitchen before sunrise, when the room is still dim and the windows hold only a faint grey reflection of the world outside. The house is not fully awake yet. A refrigerator hums with a soft electric patience. A pipe clicks inside the wall. Somewhere far down the street, a truck passes with a low sigh of tyres on damp pavement. On the counter sits an onion, round and ordinary, wrapped in dry golden skin. You touch it with your fingertips. The skin is crisp and thin, almost like old paper. It catches against your nails, flakes, and releases a mild dusty scent. Nothing about it seems dramatic. It is not polished like fruit. It does not glow with sweetness. It does not ask to be admired. Yet in its small weight you feel a whole human habit resting quietly, the reaching hand, the knife, the pot, the meal shared when the day has been long. You set it on the cutting board. The board gives a dull little knock. The knife presses through the top, and the first sharp breath rises, clean, sulphurous, familiar. Your eyes sting. You blink, smile a little, and keep going. The onion has always had this gift, the ability to make people cry without meaning to. Very impressive, really. Most vegetables have to work much harder to become emotionally complicated. A mainstream historical fact feels wonderfully clear in this kitchen. Onions remain one of the most widely used vegetables in the world, grown on every inhabited continent and built into countless cuisines as a base flavour. They appear in soups, sauces, pickles, relishes, salads, stews, rice dishes, noodle bowls, breads, grilled foods, fried snacks, and broths. They can be eaten raw, roasted, fried, dried, caramelized, powdered, fermented, or gently sweated until they nearly disappear. The onion is not simply an ingredient. It is one of the foundations beneath global cooking. You slide the chopped pieces into a warm pan. They land with a soft hiss. At first, the smell is sharp enough to wake the room. Then, slowly, it bends. The edges turn translucent. Steam rises. The scent grows sweeter, rounder, deeper, and the kitchen begins to feel inhabited, even if you are the only person standing there. Onion has a way of making an empty room seem as if someone has cared for it. Across the world, other kitchens are doing the same quiet work. In Mexico, onions meet lime, cilantro, chilies, beans, grilled meat, and corn. In India, they form the browned base of curries, though some sacred or disciplined kitchens still avoid them with admirable seriousness. In China, scallions and onions sharpen noodles, dumplings, stir-fries, and broths. In France, onions melt into soups and sauces. In West Africa, they join tomatoes, peppers, fish, rice, and stews. In the Middle East, they soften beneath chickpeas, lamb, lentils, herbs, and spice. In Japan, they may become sweet in simmered dishes or crisp in cutlets. In the American South, they perfume beans, greens, gravies, and fried food. The onion speaks many culinary languages, all with the same accent of heat and patience. You open a cupboard and find proof of its disguises: onion powder in a jar, dried onion flakes in a packet, a soup mix tucked behind rice, a seasoning blend where onion hides among salt, garlic, paprika, and mystery. A jar of pickled onions glows pink in the refrigerator, bright as a small sunrise. The fresh bulb on the counter is only one version of the plant. It has become powder, crunch, sweetness, tang, background note, and secret helper. A quirky modern tidbit sits inside the science of tears. The onion makes your eyes water because cutting its cells releases compounds that form an irritating vapor. Plant breeders have even developed low tier or tailless onion varieties, trying to make the kitchen less dramatic. This sounds helpful, and perhaps it is. But a tiny part of you wonders whether an onion that does not make anyone cry is missing its theatrical soul. Convenience is lovely. Still, some kitchen traditions seem to require a blink, a sniff, and a small complaint to feel complete. You lower the heat and listen. The pan gives little sticky whispers as the onions brown. A wooden spoon scrapes the bottom. Their scent now holds sweetness, earth, and a faint roasted edge. This is one of the quiet miracles of cooking. Time changes personality. Raw onion is bright, harsh, and honest. Cooked onion is gentle, golden, and persuasive. Leave it long enough, stir with care, and it becomes caramelized, dark, soft, almost jammy. It can make a sandwich richer, a soup deeper, a tart sweeter, or a bowl of rice feel like it has been invited to a better life. Food scientists still debate exactly how people perceive onion flavor across cultures, because biology, memory, cooking method, and language all shape taste. Some people adore raw onion sharpness, while others find it overwhelming. Some traditions celebrate sulphurous bite. Others prefer sweetness from slow cooking, and others avoid the plant for spiritual or digestive or social reasons. The onion itself is chemically complex, but the human response to it is even more layered. Taste is never only taste. It is childhood, place, habit, body, belief, and the person who first cooked for you. You step outside into a small garden where the morning has brightened. The soil is cool and slightly damp beneath your hand. Green shoots rise in rows, thin and upright, catching droplets of water. Onion plants do not seem vain. They do not spread dramatic leaves or heavy blossoms meant to stop conversation. They grow with practical restraint, underground. The bulb thickens slowly, storing energy in layers, above ground. The leaves drink light and air. It is a quiet design, and it works. In larger fields, the same plant becomes part of global agriculture. Farmers choose varieties for day length, soil, storage quality, pungency, sweetness, disease resistance, and market demand. Some onions are bred for long storage through winter. Some are mild and sweet, meant to be eaten raw. Some are small and perfect for pickling. Some are red enough to stain salads with colour. Weather still matters. Too much rain can rot them. Heat can stress them. Pests and disease can ruin a crop. Even in a technological age, onions keep farmers humble, which may be another of their historical services. You imagine the workers who bring them from field to crate to truck to store, hand pull, sort, trim, bag, stack, scan, and carry. A bulb on your counter may have passed through many lives without ever announcing their names. That is true of most food, but the onion makes it easier to remember because it still feels close to the earth. Dirt clings to its roots. Skin flakes on your counter. It is never entirely polished into abstraction. Inside, the pan is ready as you add broth. Steam lifts at once, fogging your glasses or touching your face with a warm dampness. The onion scent spreads through the room, not loud now, but steady. It becomes part of the walls, the curtains, your sweater, the day itself. This is how onions live in memory. They do not simply taste good, they mark time. A grandmother's soup, a father chopping quickly before dinner, a street stall at night, a holiday dish, a cheap meal during a difficult month, a meal after travel, a meal when someone new comes home. Every onion is layered, and that simple fact remains irresistible. You peel away dry skin, then pale flesh. Then another curve beneath. The structure seems almost philosophical, though onions would probably object to being made responsible for philosophy. They are busy, still. The metaphor is too useful to ignore. Human history is also layered: hunger under farming, farming under trade, trade under empire, empire under memory, memory under dinner. At the centre, perhaps, is not a secret jewel, but the ordinary need to be fed. You lift the spoon and taste. The broth is warm, savoury, faintly sweet. The onion has softened into something you no longer have to notice directly. It has become part of everything else. That may be its deepest talent. Some ingredients shine by standing apart. Onion often shines by disappearing into the whole. It gives itself away. As the morning settles, the kitchen grows lighter, the window shows pale sky, rooftops, leaves moving in a small wind. The sounds of the day begin gently: a door closing, water running, a distant voice, the soft clink of a bowl placed on the table. You sit with the soup in both hands. The bowl is warm against your palms. The smell rises slowly, familiar enough to calm the mind before you even swallow. And now the story softens. The onion rests in its bowl of steam, no longer sharp, no longer bright enough to sting. It has given up its edges to become warmth. Outside, the world continues with all its noise and wanting, but here the room is simple. Light gathers softly along the counter. The spoon moves slowly. The breath slows with it. You think of fields cooling under evening air, of baskets in market shade, of hands washing soil from roots, of kitchens where someone waited for the onions to sweeten. The small bulb has travelled through hunger, belief, labour, trade, science and memory, yet it ends here quietly, close to the hand, close to the mouth, close to sleep. The steam thins, the bowl cools, the day becomes gentle around you, and in that gentleness, the humble onion remains, layered, patient, and kind.